DC Extended Universe had everything it needed to become the most successful film franchise. They had the rights to every DC comic character, including the legendary Superman and Batman. Until the late 2000s and 10s, DC was a bigger brand than Marvel in both live action and animation. But today, its last 8 movies have been box office flops. What went so horribly wrong that they had to reboot the entire universe? Get comfortable, grab a cup of coffee and some snacks, because in this video, we're going to dive deep into what went wrong with the DCEU. This is the only video you need to understand the downfall, and hopefully, James Gunn won't repeat the same mistakes. So, without further ado, let's get started. Warner Brothers, witnessing the meteoric rise of Marvel's cinematic universe, sought to replicate its success. Marvel had methodically built a connected universe, beginning with individual character-centric films that culminated in the groundbreaking team-up, The Avengers. By the time The Avengers hit theaters, Marvel had already established a clear, audience-approved formula. Craft engaging standalone stories that gradually interweave into a larger, cohesive narrative. WB, however, attempted to fast-track this process, skipping the essential foundational steps that made the MCU resonate with fans. Their first attempt to kick off a shared universe came with the 2011 film Green Lantern, starring Ryan Reynolds. This film was a critical and commercial disaster. Both audiences and critics panned its uneven tone, weak screenplay, and lackluster direction. I don't know how this kind of low-quality visual effects was approved for a 2011 release, especially considering that audiences at the time had already seen great CGI and visual effects. The film's effects felt outdated, reminiscent of the early 90s. It was very foolish to start off with this film. So, WB decided to take their first serious step toward building their ambitious cinematic universe with Zack Snyder's Man of Steel, which was released in 2013. Zack Snyder is renowned for his distinct visual style, marked by slow-motion sequences, intense action, and a darker, brooding tone. His earlier works, such as 300 and Watchmen, established him as a filmmaker with a flair for visually striking and often serious storytelling. Warner Brothers entrusted Snyder with leading a new era of DC films, inspired by the critical and commercial success of Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. Nolan's work had demonstrated that a darker, more grounded approach to comic book adaptations could resonate deeply with audiences. Initially, Warner Brothers offered Nolan the opportunity to spearhead this cinematic universe. However, he declined, perhaps because he wished to explore different stories. Nevertheless, Nolan remained involved as a producer, lending his expertise to the project. Unlike previous iterations, Snyder's Superman was a complex, conflicted figure. He was portrayed as a godlike being struggling to find his place in the world, burdened by the immense responsibility his powers imposed. The film's narrative followed Clark Kent's journey, from his humble upbringing in Kansas to his evolution into Earth's protector. Man of Steel, released on June 14, 2013, grossed $670 million worldwide on a budget of $225 million, but proved to be polarizing among both audiences and critics. Some praised its ambitious scope, breathtaking action sequences, and a grounded take on what it means to be a superpowered being. Others criticized its somber tone, arguing that it lacked the hopeful and inspiring essence traditionally associated with Superman. And I personally disliked the shaky camera work. One of the film's most controversial elements was the destructive battle in Metropolis, which resulted in significant civilian casualties, further divided fans. For some, this portrayal of Superman clashed with his iconic moral code, making the character feel disconnected from his classic ethos. Personally, I appreciated Snyder's take on Superman. While it diverged from the traditional depiction, I found it refreshing. After Man of Steel in 2014, they announced their release slate through 2020, which consisted of a total of 11 movies, including 2 Justice League films. The DCEU didn't get a great start like Iron Man, yet WB saw enough financial promise in the film to press forward with their larger plans for the universe. WB made a bold decision. Instead of developing individual movies to introduce their heroes as Marvel had done, they would leapfrog directly into building a shared universe. After Snyder's first film got mixed reviews, studio heads doubted his vision but went on to their second release. And when they announced their second film, the audience lost their freaking minds. Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice was released in March 2016. This move was intended to fast-track the journey to a Justice League movie, bringing multiple characters into the spotlight and setting the stage for a grander, interconnected universe. Batman vs. Superman was once again directed by Zack Snyder, and it introduced Ben Affleck as an older, weary Batman who had grown cynical after years of crime-fighting in Gotham. The film also marked Gal Gadot's debut as Wonder Woman, and God, it was an iconic entry, followed by probably the best lines of the film.
She with you?
I thought she was with you.
This movie had some great scenes and action sequences. Actually, Snyder had made a slightly lengthy movie, keeping world building and characters in mind. The extended version, called the Ultimate Edition, received some good reviews, which included 30 minutes of additional story and action, scenes that explained how Batman got the kryptonite from Luthor and so on. However, due to studio pressure to reduce the runtime to 2.5 hours for more shows and to make it PG-13, Snyder had to cut 30 minutes from such a big movie, which really demanded the length. We can say commerce overpowered art here. The studio just cared about the number of shows rather than good storytelling, which definitely could have made them more money. The theatrical release of Batman v Superman carried the immense burden of world building within just 2 hours and 30 minutes. This ambition led to a cluttered and disjointed storyline. The film introduced Batman, Wonder Woman, and Lex Luthor while also giving glimpses of Aquaman, Flash, and Cyborg, all in a single damn movie. The overloaded narrative was criticized for being unfocused and overly complicated. One of the central criticisms was the weak justification for the conflict between Batman and Superman. Affleck's Batman, shaped by the destruction in Metropolis during Man of Steel, views Superman as a potential global threat. However, the film struggled to convincingly develop the emotional and psychological tension necessary for this conflict to resonate. The climactic fight between the two heroes, meant to be the emotional high point, came across as unearned and hollow. And let's not forget the infamous Martha scene, where their battle abruptly ends when they realize their mothers share the same name.
Save Martha! Why did you say that name? Why did you say that name?
It's his mother's name!
Okay.
While I understand what the scene was trying to convey, the execution felt absurd and unintentionally comedic. It became a pop culture punchline, widely mocked for its contrived resolution.
I was fighting a caped badass. Then I discovered his mom is named Martha, too.
No.
The tone of Batman v Superman was overwhelmingly dark, serious, and at times, even dull. It once again lacked the levity and fun that many audiences typically expect from superhero films. While Snyder clearly took into account the feedback from Man of Steel, perhaps that's why he inserted 3 to 4 hopeful scenes with Superman. Yet, the movie still faced criticism for sidelining him. Superman was relegated to a brooding, passive figure for much of the film, which frustrated many fans. The film earned one of the lowest critic scores for a superhero movie, with only 29% on Rotten Tomatoes, while the audience score was a slightly higher 63%. After the failure of Batman vs. Superman, Zack Snyder's perspective on comics and superheroes began circulating, shocking many DC fans with his statements, and that his take on Batman would be darker. Read this statement for yourself. His past comments on Superman led many to conclude that Snyder never truly understood or appreciated comic characters, and didn't care deeply for the source material.
I'm deep in Watchmen. I'm deep in deconstructing like superheroes. It's like, hey, do you want to make a Superman movie? It's like, what? I'm about to tear him down. Right? I'm going to kill him. I'm not interested in fixing him or making him interesting. He's the enemy right now.
Despite the mixed reception, Batman v Superman managed to gross $874 million globally. However, it still fell short of Warner Brothers' billion-dollar expectations, especially considering it featured the first-ever on-screen meeting of Batman and Superman, two of the most iconic superheroes in pop culture. The underperformance raised concerns among the studio executives, who began to question Snyder's vision for the DCEU. Initially, there was excitement about their ambitious, fast-tracked approach, but it quickly gave way to unease as they realized it wasn't delivering the expected results. Behind the scenes, WB executives were growing increasingly anxious and started to reconsider Snyder's direction for the cinematic universe. This pivotal moment marked the beginning of a shift in the DCEU's trajectory, as studio heads sought a new approach to salvage the franchise. The decision to pivot from Snyder's path would eventually lead to a more varied direction, with subsequent films opting for a lighter tone and restructuring the shared universe. However, the scars of Batman vs. Superman and its divisive reception would remain a point of reflection in the years that followed. Honestly, this failure marked the first step in the downfall of the DCEU. Now buckle up. We're going to dive deep into Snyder's Justice League release drama, which came out after Wonder Woman 1984. Despite these ups and downs, there was still a strong group of fans who clamored to see Zack Snyder's original vision for Justice League. After the release of Man of Steel, Zack Snyder outlined his vision for the DCEU, consisting of a 5-film arc that included Man of Steel, Dawn of Justice, and a Justice League trilogy. By February 2017, Snyder began screening rough versions of Justice League, but studio executives disliked it, feeling the plot was too complex. They decided to pivot and slowly handed over control of the script, and later the direction, to Joss Whedon. Snyder made several changes to the film from the start as per the studio's requests. However, he did not directly challenge these changes, as he and his family were dealing with the tragic death of his daughter, Autumn. Eventually, he stepped down during post-production. While Snyder's rough cut was poorly received by test audiences, the early screenings of Whedon's cut surprisingly scored as high as the first Wonder Woman. This prompted Warner Brothers to proceed with Whedon's version. Later, an anonymous WB executive admitted that even though the studio didn't like the stupefying changes in Whedon's version, they were reluctant to criticize it and decided to move forward. After seeing Whedon's theatrical version in late 2017, Snyder's wife, Deborah, and executive producer Christopher Nolan advised him not to watch it, knowing it would break his heart. In February 2018, a source claimed that Snyder had been quietly fired by the studio about 3 months before the public announcement of his departure. After the theatrical release of Justice League, fans created an online petition to release the Snyder Cut, which gained more than 100,000 signatures. The movement, which used the hashtag #ReleaseTheSnyderCut on social media, began even before fans knew that Snyder's cut of Justice League actually existed. It gained traction following the theatrical version's mixed reviews, as fans particularly disliked the film and assumed Whedon had created an inferior version. On the second anniversary of the theatrical release of Justice League, the cast, including Ben Affleck, Gal Gadot, Jason Momoa, and other crew members, voiced their support on social media for releasing the Snyder Cut. Fans went to extreme lengths to amplify their demand, fueled further by Snyder himself, who shared behind-the-scenes pictures on social media to motivate them. Following the tragic death of Snyder's daughter and his departure from the film, the Snyder Cut movement began raising awareness and funds for suicide prevention. Their efforts raised over $500,000 for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. The campaign gained significant visibility, with fans purchasing ad space on 2 billboards in Times Square during the 2019 New York Comic Con. These billboards even featured quotes from cast and crew members advocating for Snyder's vision. At its peak, Release the Snyder Cut trended with over 1 million tweets in a single day. However, according to Rolling Stone, Warner Media's internal investigation found that about 13% of the accounts participating in the campaign were fake. The publication also reported that Snyder may have subtly manipulated the movement, citing interviews with over 20 individuals involved in both versions of the film. Throughout the campaign, the fandom split into 2 camps. One group genuinely supported Snyder's vision and hoped to see his trilogy completed. The other group, however, became infamous for toxic behavior, resorting to harassment, threats, and cyberbullying anyone who criticized the movement. Initially, WB was hesitant to release the Snyder Cut. They approached Snyder with the idea of releasing his unfinished version, but he rejected the offer, insisting that it had to be a fully completed film or nothing at all. In February 2020, WB finally agreed to let Snyder complete his vision. On May 20th, 2020, during a Q&A after an online watch party of Man of Steel with Henry Cavill, Snyder officially announced that his cut of Justice League would be released as Zack Snyder's Justice League on HBO Max in 2021. Interestingly, there was a bizarre hiccup before its official release. When viewers attempted to stream Tom and Jerry on HBO Max, Snyder's Justice League accidentally played instead, leading to an early leak. The film's 4-hour cut restored Snyder's original footage, expanding on character backstories, plotlines, and the overarching mythology that had been stripped away in Whedon's version. Snyder filmed approximately 4 to 5 minutes of additional footage, which appears at the end of the movie in a dystopian future sequence, including the introduction of Martian Manhunter. The reshoots, along with finishing the visual effects, scoring, and editing, added an extra $70 million to the production costs. Finally, Zack Snyder's Justice League was released on March 18, 13, 2021, on HBO Max. The film received widespread praise, particularly when compared to the theatrical version. Its world building was presented on an epic scale. Character introductions and development were more fleshed out, and the visuals were simply spectacular. Since the film was released directly on a streaming platform, we can't assess its financial success the way we would for a theatrical release. Moreover, OTT platforms rarely disclose detailed viewership data, and even when they do, verifying it is difficult. As a result, we have to rely on ratings to gauge its impact. To date, Zack Snyder's Justice League holds the highest audience rating for any DCEU project, sitting at an impressive 92%. Critics also gave it a respectable score of 71%, signaling that content-wise, the movie was a hit. While the Snyder Cut was well received by fans and offered a sense of closure, it did little to change the franchise's trajectory. By this point, the damage had been done, and the DCEU's potential as a cohesive shared universe was irreparably compromised. After some fans deemed #Release the Snyder Cut movement a success, they shifted their focus to demanding Snyder's full trilogy. They launched the #Restore the Snyderverse, hoping to pressure Warner Brothers into continuing Snyder's vision. However, this movement didn't gain as much traction. Some fans believed they had the power to influence the studio, but the reality was more complex. WB had a different motivation for releasing the Snyder Cut. The studio was preparing to launch their streaming platform, and the timing coincided with the peak of the pandemic when strict filming restrictions were in place. Since fans were already clamoring for the Snyder Cut, and extensive filming wasn't necessary, just post-production, WB saw an opportunity. Releasing the Snyder Cut was a strategic decision to leverage existing demand while minimizing new production costs. If you want to watch the detailed story of DCEU's failure, head over to the FilmyHead YouTube channel and check it out. Thanks for watching.